Hi, my name is Aaron, and this is Old TV Cinema. Now, everybody knows that TV shows get canceled. Bad ratings, shrinking budgets, the star decides they'd rather make movies that nobody watches. We've all seen it happen, but today we're talking about something different. Today we're talking about the shows that didn't just fade out quietly. They got buried under courtroom drama, contract warfare, and the kind of Hollywood backstabbing that makes your average soap opera plot look like a kindergarten disagreement. 13 beloved shows, canceled not by audiences, but by lawyers. Number 13, The Associates, 1979. Before we get to the heavy hitters, one that almost nobody remembers, which is honestly a shame, because The Associates was genuinely sharp television for its time. IBC launched it in the fall of 1979, a legal comedy set inside a prestigious New York law firm, following a group of young associates navigating the cutthroat world of big city law. Think of it as a smarter, funnier cousin to shows that would come later. The cast was terrific. Wilfred Hyde-White, the kind of effortlessly charming British actor who made everything feel more sophisticated just by showing up, led the ensemble as the eccentric senior partner Emerson Marshall. Martin Short was in it before anyone outside of Canada really knew who Martin Short was. Let that sink in for a second. The show had brains, wit, and a genuine point of view about how absurd the legal world actually was. Critics liked it, audiences were starting to warm up to it, and then the lawyers showed up. Real ones, not the funny TV kind. Behind the scenes, a bitter dispute erupted between the show's writers and producers over creative ownership and screen credit attribution. The writer's room, which, remember, was the engine powering everything that made the show worth watching, became its own courtroom. Who owned what? Who deserved credit for which storylines? Who had final say over the scripts? These weren't small questions, and nobody was in a hurry to answer them diplomatically. ABC deciding that a legal comedy drowning in actual legal drama was more irony than they could handle, quietly pulled the plug after just 13 episodes. Martin Short moved on. Wilfred Hyde-White moved on. And The Associates became one of those shows that TV historians occasionally bring up when they want to talk about potential that never got a fair shot. The real kicker, the legal dispute that killed it, was never fully resolved publicly, which means the show that was literally about lawyers got taken down by lawyers. And we never even got the full story. You can't write that. Evidence. Number 12. Aftermash, 1983. If you wanted proof that the network executives of the early 1980s were willing to chase lightning in a bottle, regardless of how impossible that actually is, look no further than Aftermash. When MASH ended in February of 1983, with what was then the most watched television finale in history, CBS faced an obvious problem. That audience wasn't going anywhere. They were grieving. They wanted more. And CBS, bless their hearts, thought they could give it to them. Aftermash followed Colonel Potter, Corporal Klinger, and Father Mulcahy as they reunited stateside at a veterans hospital in Missouri. And honestly, for what it was, the first season wasn't terrible. The chemistry between Harry Morgan, Jamie Farr, and William Christopher was still there. The show debuted to enormous ratings simply on the strength of nostalgia and goodwill. But here's where it gets messy. Behind the scenes, CBS was operating under a licensing agreement with 20th Century Fox that covered the original MASH characters, their likenesses, and the creative DNA of the franchise. And that agreement had teeth. Every story idea, every character direction, every potential crossover had to navigate Fox's legal approval process. The show's producers found themselves in an increasingly impossible position, trying to create fresh, relevant television, while simultaneously getting sign-off from a studio that treated every script like a potential intellectual property violation. Storylines were killed, creative directions were shut down. The show that had been MASH thrived because it could go anywhere, emotionally and tonally. Aftermash couldn't go anywhere without checking with a lawyer first. By season 2, the ratings had collapsed, the creative spark was gone, and CBS canceled it. The legal framework that was supposed to protect the franchise had effectively strangled its own offspring. It's the television equivalent of being so worried about someone scratching your car that you park it in a garage and never drive it again. Congratulations, the car is fine, it just doesn't go anywhere. Number 11. We Got It Made, 1983. Here's a name that'll really test your retro TV knowledge. We Got It Made premiered on NBC in the fall of 1983, a domestic comedy that followed two bachelor roommates whose lives got complicated when they hired Mickey McKenzie, played by Terry Copley, as their live-in housekeeper. Look, it wasn't exactly breaking new ground thematically, but it had charm, it had a likable cast, and it found a decent audience in its first season. Tom Villard and Matt McCoy played the roommates. Copley was a genuine comic presence. The show had a light, easy energy that worked perfectly for early 1980s network television. And then the contract disputes started. When NBC decided not to renew the show after its first season, the cast and production team didn't just accept it and move on. A messy legal battle erupted over contractual obligations, syndication rights, and what exactly the network owed the people involved when it pulled the plug. Networks in that era had a habit of making promises in contracts that they assumed they'd never have to keep, and cast members had a habit of actually reading those contracts. Funny how that works. The legal wrangling dragged on long enough that We Got It Made actually came back. Not on NBC, but in first-run syndication in 1987, with most of the original cast returning. Which sounds like a happy ending, until you realize that syndicated resurrection shows almost never recapture the original magic. And We Got It Made was not the exception to that rule. It ran for another 2 seasons in syndication and then disappeared for good. A show that probably would have been forgotten anyway became a footnote in the history of how networks and talent fought over the scraps of cancellation. Number 10. The Tortellis, 1987. All right, hands up if you remember the Tortellis. Anyone? Anyone at all? No? Good. You're completely normal. The Tortellis was a Cheers spin-off that aired on NBC in the spring of 1987, following Nick Tortelli, Carla's chronically unreliable ex-husband, played by Dan Hedaya, and his new wife Loretta, played by Jean Kassem, as they relocated to Las Vegas. The concept made sense on paper. Nick Tortelli was genuinely funny in small doses on Cheers. The question was whether anyone actually wanted an entire show built around him. The answer, as it turned out, was no. But here's the part that rarely gets mentioned. Even before audiences had a chance to render their verdict, the show was already deep in contractual trouble. Paramount, which produced Cheers and therefore held the rights to these characters, was navigating a complicated web of agreements with both the network and the cast members being spun off. Dan Hedaya and Jean Kassem had deals with Cheers that didn't automatically translate to a spin-off situation. New contracts needed to be negotiated. New terms needed to be set. New lawyers needed to be paid, presumably on a boat somewhere. The negotiations were, by multiple accounts, contentious enough to affect the actual production of the show. Creative decisions were being made not by the people best positioned to make them, but by whoever had the most leverage in the contract discussions at any given moment. The Tortellis lasted 13 episodes before NBC canceled it. Hedaya returned to Cheers for occasional appearances. Kassem moved on, and the Tortellis became the answer to a trivia question that nobody has ever actually asked, which, now that I think about it, might be the saddest sentence I've written all week. Number 9. Hull High, 1990. Okay, this one is genuinely obscure, and I love it for that reason. Hull High premiered on NBC in the summer of 1990, and it was, and I want to be precise here, a musical drama set in a high school where the characters randomly broke into choreographed song and dance numbers to express their emotions. Before Glee, before High School Musical, before any of that. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that sounds either brilliantly ahead of its time or completely insane. And the answer is both. It was both of those things simultaneously. The show starred Will Lyman as a teacher navigating the beautifully chaotic world of teenagers who apparently had a full backup band available at all times. It was weird and ambitious and oddly watchable in the way that only truly committed television experiments can be. NBC gave it 9 episodes before pulling it off the schedule. But here's where it gets interesting. The production company behind Hull High did not go quietly. When NBC canceled the show, a lawsuit followed over the terms of the cancellation agreement. Networks in that era had specific contractual obligations when they axed a show mid-order. Episode guarantees, financial commitments, the whole apparatus. Hull High's producers argued NBC hadn't honored those commitments. NBC argued otherwise. The legal back and forth that followed ensured that Hull High got written about in trade publications for reasons that had nothing to do with its surprisingly catchy musical numbers. The show never recovered. The lawsuit eventually settled, as most of these things do, quietly and away from public view. But Hull High survived long enough in the cultural memory to be called a pioneer by people who study television history seriously, which feels like justice of a kind, even if it arrived about 30 years too late. Number 8. Cop Rock 1990. Let's talk about Stephen Bacco for a second, because you need to understand who we're dealing with here. Bacco was the man behind Hill Street Blues and L.A. Law. He was, by the late 1980s, one of the most powerful and creatively respected producers in television. Networks gave him things that they would not give other people: blank checks, creative freedom, the kind of latitude that makes other showrunners physically ill with envy. CBS gave him a landmark deal in 1988, a commitment to produce 10 series over multiple years. It was unprecedented. It was a bet on a proven genius, and then Cop Rock happened. Cop Rock debuted in the fall of 1990, and it was, I want to be fair here, an extraordinarily bold piece of television. It was a gritty police procedural, think Hill Street Blues, in which the characters periodically stopped what they were doing to perform fully staged musical numbers. Juries sang their verdicts. Gang members harmonized. A crack-addicted mother sang about surrendering her baby. The ambition was staggering. The execution was evasive, is probably the diplomatic word. Critics shredded it. Audiences tuned out almost immediately. It lasted 11 episodes. But here's the part of the story that got lost in all the gleeful piling on. By the time Cop Rock aired, Bochco's relationship with CBS had already turned contentious. The landmark 10 series deal that had seemed like a dream arrangement had become a source of bitter disagreement. Disputes over budgets, creative approval, and what exactly CBS was and wasn't entitled to control had been festering for months. The legal architecture of that deal was being challenged from multiple directions before a single musical number had been filmed. Cop Rock didn't just fail in the ratings. It landed in the middle of an ongoing war between its creator and its network, which means even if audiences had loved it, and they did not love it, the show was already fighting on two fronts. Most shows can't survive one, and that's a wrap on Cop Rock. You were weird, and I kind of respected you for it. Number 7. The Flash, 1990. Now we're getting into the ones that genuinely hurt. CBS launched The Flash in the fall of 1990, and it was, by the standards of what live-action superhero television could be at that point in history, legitimately impressive. John Wesley Shipp played Barry Allen, a police scientist who gains super speed after a laboratory accident and becomes Central City's resident crimson-clad protector. The production values were serious. The costume, and this costume deserves its own moment of appreciation, was a masterpiece of practical effects work, a muscled aerodynamic suit that actually looked like it belonged on a superhero. The show had heart, it had style, and it had an audience that was genuinely invested. It lasted one season, 22 episodes, and then it was gone. The official explanation at the time was budget, and the budget was genuinely enormous. Reportedly, one of the most expensive hour-long dramas on network television at that point. But budget concerns don't fully explain what happened, because the financial pressure on the show was itself partly a product of something messier. DC Comics and Warner Brothers were behind the scenes, engaged in an ongoing struggle over character approval rights, licensing fees, and the creative boundaries of what CBS could and couldn't do with their property. Every script had to navigate a thicket of approvals. Creative directions that the showrunners wanted to pursue kept running into walls built by rights holders who had their own ideas about how the characters should be used and who should profit from it. The show's producers found themselves caught between what made good television and what satisfied the legal requirements of an increasingly fraught licensing arrangement. By the time CBS made the call to cancel, the decision was almost a formality. John Wesley Shipp went on to become a beloved fixture of the later CW Flash series, playing Barry Allen's father. Full circle and genuinely wonderful, but that original show deserved more than one season, and it deserved better than being killed by a contract dispute between two companies arguing over a fictional man who runs fast. Number 6. Fish Police, 1992. I need you to stay with me on this one because it sounds completely made up, and I promise you it isn't. Fish Police was an animated series that CBS aired in January of 1992. It was an underwater noir. Yes, underwater noir, I'm going to need you to accept that phrase and move forward. Based on a comic book series created by Steve Moncues, the show followed Inspector Gill, a fish detective solving crimes in a city at the bottom of the ocean, with a cast of anthropomorphic sea creatures navigating corruption, romance, and the occasional murder. It was weird and dark and funny in a way that felt genuinely original. CBS burned through 6 episodes and then canceled it. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, the cancellation was just because a fish noir cartoon was a tough sell for network television in 1992. And honestly, fair point. That's not wrong. But underneath the straightforward story of a show that didn't find its audience, there was a legal dispute between Steve Moncues and the production company over rights and royalties that added a particularly bitter dimension to the whole thing. Moncues had created the original comic independently. The transition to network animation brought with it a set of financial and creative arrangements that he felt did not adequately recognize or compensate his ownership of the property. The dispute over how much the original creator was owed and how much control he retained became one of those Hollywood stories that make you understand why some artists never want to sell their work to a studio. Fish Police is now primarily remembered as an animated curiosity. But somewhere underneath the talking fish and the jazz-inflected crime plots, there was a genuine creative vision that deserved better than being caught in the net of a rights dispute. I'm sorry, I had to do one fish pun. Just the one. I'm only human. Number 5. South of Sunset, 1993. This one is maybe the most dramatic entry on our entire list. Are you ready? CBS premiered South of Sunset in October of 1993. It was a detective drama starring Glenn Frey. Yes, that Glenn Frey, the Eagles' Glenn Frey, as a Hollywood private investigator. The show had a solid hook, decent production values, and the kind of sun-drenched Los Angeles atmosphere that CBS clearly thought could carry it to a long run. It aired once, one episode. CBS canceled it the next day. Now, South of Sunset's overnight ratings were genuinely bad. It finished last in its time slot by a significant margin, so the cancellation itself wasn't exactly a shock. But here's the layer of the story that most people never heard. Before the show even aired its single episode, it was already in legal trouble. Don Henley, the other Eagles. Don Henley, Glenn Frey's longtime bandmate and creative partner, had sued over the unauthorized use of his song in connection with the production. Without getting too deep into the contractual weeds, music rights in television productions have always been a minefield, and this one exploded spectacularly. The lawsuit, combined with the disastrous ratings, essentially made any continuation of the show impossible before the cast had even finished reading their reviews. South of Sunset became one of the fastest cancellations in network history, and a significant portion of the reason was a legal dispute between two men who had already spent decades being complicated with each other. Glenn Frey, to his immense credit, handled the whole thing with grace. He continued making music and occasional television appearances until his passing in January of 2016. But South of Sunset remains a genuinely remarkable data point in the history of shows that never had a chance. One episode, one lawsuit, one extraordinary footnote. Number 4. The Jackie Thomas Show, 1992. All right, buckle up, because this one gets personal in a way that most canceled sitcoms simply don't. The Jackie Thomas Show premiered on ABC in the fall of 1992. Tom Arnold, yes, Roseanne's Tom Arnold, starred as Jackie Thomas, an obnoxious, wildly successful television star whose enormous ego made life miserable for everyone around him. The show was essentially Tom Arnold playing a version of Tom Arnold, and in a different context. That meta-commentary might have been genuinely interesting. The problem was that by the time the show premiered, Tom Arnold and Roseanne Arnold were in the early stages of what would become one of Hollywood's ugliest and most public divorces. And their divorce wasn't just a personal matter, it was also a professional and legal catastrophe that touched everything both of them were connected to. Roseanne's show, Roseanne, was the most watched sitcom on television. Tom Arnold had significant creative ties to that production. The legal untangling of their professional and personal partnership was happening in real time, loudly, and very much in public. Every deposition, every accusation, every counter-accusation was being reported on by tabloids that treated the whole thing like must-see television. The Jackie Thomas Show could not exist in a vacuum outside of that context. It was being watched and evaluated through the lens of the Arnold divorce by audiences, by critics, and by the network executives who had to decide every week whether they wanted to keep their names attached to it. The legal and personal chaos surrounding Tom Arnold made the show radioactive in ways that had nothing to do with whether it was actually funny. ABC canceled it after 13 episodes. The divorce eventually concluded. Tom Arnold rebuilt his career in films and television, but The Jackie Thomas Show remains a case study in how a performer's life outside the set can determine what happens on it, even when nobody talks about it directly. Number 3. Delta, 1993. We actually talked about Delta Burke earlier in the context of designing women, but she deserves her own chapter here because what happened to her CBS sitcom Delta is a specific kind of Hollywood story that doesn't get told often enough. Here's the setup. By 1992, Delta Burke had won her wrongful termination lawsuit against the producers of Designing Women. She had, in the eyes of the court, been treated unlawfully. She had been vindicated. In a town where power usually protects itself, she had actually won. And then, she found out what winning actually costs. CBS greenlit Delta in 1992, a country music-themed sitcom built around Burke's southern charm and genuine comedic talent. On paper, it had everything it needed: a proven star, a likable premise, network backing. But the entertainment industry has a long memory and a short tolerance for people it perceives as difficult, regardless of whether that perception is fair or legally defensible. The lawsuit that Burke had won, the lawsuit that had proved she was wronged, followed her into every room. Producers who might have championed the show were cautious. The Industry Whisper Network, which operates entirely outside any courtroom, had made its own judgment. The show also carried the shadow of the ongoing legal tensions with the Designing Women camp, which had not fully resolved itself emotionally even after the court settlement. Burke was trying to build something new while standing in the rubble of a very public fight, and the rubble kept getting in the way. Delta was canceled after one season. It never found its footing, partly because of genuine creative challenges, and partly because the climate around it was poisoned before it ever had a fair shot. Burke's story is one of the more complicated in this era of television. A talented woman who fought for herself, won, and then discovered that winning had its own price. She deserved better from the industry than she got, and I'll stand by that. Number 2. Reasonable Doubts, 1991. Here's one that deserves to be remembered far more than it is. Reasonable Doubts premiered on NBC in the fall of 1991, and it was, by any honest assessment, one of the better legal dramas of its era. Mark Harmon, yes, the same Mark Harmon who would eventually spend 2 decades as Gibbs on NCIS, starred as Dickie Cobb, a Chicago detective partnered with Tess Kaufman, a hearing-impaired assistant district attorney, played by the extraordinary Marlee Matlin. Their dynamic was sharp, their chemistry was genuine, and the show handled Matlin's character's deafness with a matter-of-fact respect that was genuinely progressive for early 1990s network television. Critics responded warmly. The show had a committed audience. It had legs, and then the contract situation imploded. What happened behind the scenes at Reasonable Doubts was, by multiple accounts, a negotiation process that went badly wrong in ways that directly affected the show's future. As the series headed toward what should have been a contract renewal conversation, the discussions between the network, the production company, and the cast became adversarial enough to make any long-term continuation essentially unworkable. The details, as with most of these situations, were never fully aired publicly. Lawyers tend to discourage that kind of transparency. But the practical result was that a show that deserved a long, healthy run was effectively canceled by the weight of its own backstage dysfunction before NBC ever formally made the call. By the time the official cancellation came, it felt less like a decision and more like an acknowledgement of something that had already happened. Reasonable Doubts wrapped after 2 seasons. Harmon went on to a remarkable television career. Matlin continued working in film and television and advocacy. And Reasonable Doubts remains one of those shows that people who remember it remember with genuine affection, and people who never saw it would probably love if they could find it. Number 1. Lois and Clark. The New Adventures of Superman, 1993. Oh, this one. This one still hurts people. Lois and Clark. The New Adventures of Superman premiered on ABC in the fall of 1993, and it was, for 4 seasons, one of the most charming and genuinely fun superhero shows that network television had ever produced. Dean Cain was a warm, charismatic Clark Kent. Terry Hatcher was a revelation as Lois Lane. Funny, fierce, and fully capable of carrying storylines that had nothing to do with the man in the cape. Their romantic tension, their banter, their slow build toward each other was the beating heart of the show. The audience loved them. ABC loved the ratings. For 3 seasons, everything was fine. And then came the cliffhanger. At the end of season 3, Lois and Clark got engaged. Audiences were invested in a way that goes beyond casual TV watching. This was the kind of emotional commitment that viewers make when a show has genuinely earned their trust over years. The season 3 finale ended with the couple's wedding, interrupted by the appearance of a mysterious baby left on their doorstep. Season 4 would answer the question of who the baby was and where it came from. Season 4 answered almost nothing. The baby storyline went in circles. The show felt unmoored. And then, in the spring of 1997, ABC canceled it with the story unresolved, leaving millions of viewers without a proper ending to a story they had been following for 4 years. Here is what those viewers were never fully told at the time. Behind the scenes, DC Comics and Warner Brothers were in an ongoing and increasingly hostile dispute with ABC and the show's producers over creative control of the Superman property. DC had approval rights over major storyline directions and character developments. Those approval rights had been an irritant throughout the show's run, but by seasons 3 and 4, they had become a genuine obstacle. The baby storyline, the one that made no sense and went nowhere, was not the result of bad writing in isolation. It was, at least in part, the result of creative decisions being blocked, redirected, and constrained by rights holders who had their own ideas about where Superman's story should and shouldn't go. The producers were trying to tell a story with one hand tied behind their backs by legal and contractual obligations that the audience knew nothing about. By the time ABC made the cancellation call, the relationship between all the parties involved had deteriorated to the point where even the finale, if there had been a real finale, would have been a negotiated compromise between competing legal interests rather than the ending the show deserved. Lois and Clark ended without resolution. Dean Cain and Terry Hatcher moved on to other projects. The fans moved on, albeit not without some bitterness that persists to this day. If you spend any time in the right corners of the internet, and the show that had been one of the warmest, most genuinely joyful superhero stories ever put on television was left frozen at the moment it should have been at its most triumphant. That's not a bad ratings story. That's not a creative failure story. That's a corporate legal warfare story. And the people who paid the price for it were the ones who had done nothing wrong. The audience who showed up every week and trusted the show to take care of them. Lois and Clark deserved better. And if you watched it when it aired and you're still annoyed about that ending, I want you to know that your annoyance is completely justified. I'm annoyed on your behalf right now, and I wasn't even there. And that's our list. 13 beloved shows, canceled not by bad writing or fading audiences, but by the legal machinery that operates in the background of every show you've ever loved. Mostly invisible, occasionally catastrophic. What's remarkable, when you look at all of these together, is how often the audience was the last to know. These shows ended, credits rolled, fans moved on or didn't, and somewhere in a filing cabinet at a law firm that probably charged $400 an hour, the real story of why any of this happened sat in a folder marked confidential. Television is a collaborative art form built on an industrial foundation. and sometimes the industrial foundation wins. Which is a fancy way of saying that sometimes a great show ends because two companies couldn't agree on a licensing fee, and nobody tells you that because it's not a good story. It's just an expensive one. I want to know which of these hit you hardest. Were you a Lois and Clark fan left hanging on that ending? Did you remember the flash and feel the sting of what could have been? Drop it in the comments below, because I read them all, and these conversations are genuinely my favorite part of making this channel. If you enjoyed this one, please hit that like button and subscribe to Old TV Cinema for more deep dives into the stories behind the stories. We've got more coming: forgotten pilots, stars who walked away, very special episodes that got networks in more trouble than they bargained for. All of it. Stick around. Until next time, this is Aaron, and this is Old TV Cinema. Thanks for watching.